Yeah, it's been a while.
Welcome back, come on, come in. Sit back, relax, playing games with friends. Done for the day, with nothing to do. Then watch some games, stumbling out with Plupachu.
Ooh, welcome back to the channel, everyone, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Plupachoop, and the small group of Plupatroops who have watched my channel over the years probably noticed that the Big 25 was not full of hot new gaming videos that you probably wouldn't last 5 seconds to. No, I decided to take a much needed break from the old YouTube grind due to having gas station toilet mental health and just feeling overall burnt out from streaming and aiming to make a new review every 2 weeks back in the slightly less big 2.4. So yeah, I took the year off. In that time, I focused on doing some reflection, healing, all that good stuff. But more importantly, I focused on getting back into my backlog and reconnecting with why I started this channel in the first place: to play more video games. And so I really dove deep into Big Gamea with the goal of beating 2024's grand total of 28 games. And boys, I have some great news. Today we're going to be tier listing every game that I beat in 2025, and there are indeed quite a few more games than 28 on this list. This year I completed 42 games or expansions. I'm counting both. Yeah, make your own list, I don't care. And it's going to cover a lot of new releases and older games alike, and this list will be in the order that I beat these games in. I've also included some games that either don't have an ending or games that maybe do that I feel I played enough to have a strong take on, but maybe I didn't actually beat. So before we get started, I do want to say that the length of each section is not vindicative of how good each game is or bad it is. Sometimes I just yap a bit more about certain games. One last thing of maintenance, only a few of these games have footage captured by me, and that wasn't by design. I would have loved including more of my own footage here, but obviously I wasn't really making content last year and wasn't sure when I was going to come back. And even if I wanted to record, my PS5 was in the shop for a while getting its HDMI port fixed, and I just got a new PC, so trying to set all that stuff up has been kind of a lot. I still wanted to make a video, so some of these clips you're going to see are going to be at the beginning of games. Some of them are going to just be the trailers. Anyways, in the comments below, I would love to hear some highlights of your gaming year of 2025 and what games you've finished. So today we're here for a good time and a long time. Sit back, relax, grab a snack as I go through and rank every single game that I beat in 2025, and then some. Enjoy. Okay, now for the tiers that I'm going to be ranking these on. First up, we have games of the year. That's going to be what it sounds like, the best games that I played this year. And like I said, this is a mix of backlog games and new games. So it's just any game in 2025 that I felt like was a really good game, like the best of the best. Great games are games that maybe didn't quite get up into the games of the year tier, but they're still excellent and they're still worth your time. Good games are games that are pretty fun. You know, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. If you want to think about these on letters, this would be B tier, like pretty good games, but maybe just not. Something is like maybe holding them back, or maybe just my personal opinion, I didn't enjoy it as much as the stuff that's higher. Meh, it's just like average experiences, like the 5 out of 10 games you would play. And then we have poop, like actual poop, like really bad poopy poop games, like just the worst shit out there. Okay, so first up on the games that I don't really have an ending for that I still put a decent amount of time into, we have the horror co-op game REPO. This was a game that I picked up for the same reason why many people did, and it was that it was a lot of hype and a lot of my friends were getting into it. REPO takes a similar formula to the breakout hit Lethal Company, in which players make up a team sent into creepy locations full of powerful and scary creatures where they basically ransack the place of all of its loot so that they can keep on living. There are upgrades and tools along the way, and I'm sure there's even more of these now, as it's been quite a while since me and my group have gotten around to playing this. But yeah, REPO provided a ton of entertainment for its price tag for us. I will just say that as any of these games though, it is centered around playing with your friends. This is a game whose level of enjoyment could definitely be dependent on who you play with, or at least having some friends at the very least. And nobody wants to play a game like this with a guy that's sweating his ass off and yelling over the mic at people over a game whose entire premise is around the fact that you will eventually die and have to start over. That being said, most of the people that I played this game with were pretty laid back and funny fellows, and we even had a fun little game at some point where another game I was playing on this list, spoilers, Pokemon Crystal. I was playing it when I was hiding around the map, and I would just want to go to play with them and then kind of get sidetracked, and then they would eventually find me hiding in various containers because of the Pokemon Crystal music blaring through the proximity chat. And this game provides plenty of those tense moments and a lot of funny interactions should players have a friend group that games like these kind of target. I'm lucky to have such a friend group. Love you boys. And REPO, I think, is going to go into good tier. I think it's definitely like a great game. Oh, well, a good game, I guess. But I definitely think it's like a good game. I just don't know if it necessarily gets lifted up into the great games category. I think there's stuff on this list that just kind of, to me personally, it's really just like, it's not a quality thing, it's more of just like a personal interest thing. I like horror games, I like whatever they call these friend slop games, but I just think that, yeah, I think it fits best in good games. Next up is another breakout hit of this year, and that is Schedule 1, a game that I for sure caved to the hype on and bought pretty soon after its launch. In this game, you play as a dealer of fine goods who starts off with a small operation that you eventually grow into a pharmaceutical empire. Yeah, that's it. Schedule 1 and its gameplay loop are a lot of fun, and it fits nicely amongst all these other shop and drug dealer simulators, in which you focus on slowly growing your empire brick by brick. Except in this game, it's kind of literal. After a while, it did get a little bit repetitive, like all these games kind of do at some point, and so I didn't finish the game or even really get to the best upgrades, but I did put a pretty respectable 20 hours or so on it, and so yeah, I feel like I can easily talk about this game with conviction. And with that conviction, I will say, yeah, it's pretty good. Schedule 1 is a pretty fun, at times addicting experience in which players can live out their Breaking Bad dreams. I'm going to put Schedule 1 in the good games tier as well, below REPO, because I do think just with the horror themes, I do enjoy REPO a little bit more. Have you ever watched Blue Lock and thought, man, this needs a game? Well, Rematch aimed to make an experience sort of like Blue Lock, in which players make up small squads of footballers and compete against each other in fast-paced matches. This was one that I was extremely excited for, and for the 30 hours I got out of it, I did have a lot of fun. This game has what feels like a pretty high skill ceiling in terms of it being easy to learn with the fundamentals, but pretty difficult to master a lot of these mechanics, as the game just doesn't really throw them out there for you to know. This is another one where having friends helps a lot, as this game unfortunately managed to copy more of Blue Lock's plot than intended, I think. Most of the players that I encountered that were not my friends were strikers through and through. You would find them all over the game, and it didn't matter what position they were assigned or where they were supposed to be. Who needs to stay in goal when there's an open goal over there to score on, right? But yeah, there are a lot of players like this. They just call for the ball constantly and just try to hit a dribble move or shoot and immediately lose the ball. But that being said, with the right team who are all focused on winning more than trying to be that guy, you can make some really awesome highlight reel plays, and the game does lean into this flashiness. Now, I will say overall, the game did get a little stale after a while, and me and my friends kind of just lost interest. I did get the platinum for this game though, and even though it took them months to fix a bug that would not recognize the last 2 trophies I needed, it is there now, so I guess it was all worth it. I'm gonna go ahead and put Rematch in the meh tier. I feel like it did something interesting with football games, but overall, at the time in which I was playing, there just really wasn't enough to the game to keep me going. Another big game for streamers that went pretty viral for its simple gameplay loop and adorable visuals, we are talking about Peak. Peak is yet another game who, while it can be enjoyed alone, is really centered more around having a fun group to play with, where you can kind of just sit back, relax, and plummet to your death off the side of a mountain as you try over and over again to reach the elusive peak. From its cute art style to the hilarious moments that games like these really lend themselves to, Peak is a really solid game that provides yet another simple concept that works best when played with others. Simplicity is in every aspect of this game, really, from its art style to its gameplay to the biome designs, and I feel like that's really what makes it so approachable for so many different groups of people who just want to have fun and hike with their friends. This one is another good game tier game for me that fits well alongside its contemporaries, but I do think of all of the kind of friend slop, if that's what you want to call them, games, I think this was the most fun to me when I was playing it. It's just like hilarious to play this game, and like the way proximity chat works and just watching one of your friends fall off the side of a mountain is like hilarious. Now, this next one is a bit of a rant, and I know that not everybody likes Football Manager. That's totally fine. If you want to skip this rant, go to the timestamp on screen, because I'm going to talk a lot about this game for a couple minutes. This one is a bit of a mixed bag for me. For those of you who don't know, Football Manager is a management game series in which players take the reins of a football team in various leagues and at various different playing levels around the world. I would say their biggest selling point has usually been the amount of detail that the game simulates and the learning curve that it takes to really start understanding the systems in place that the game is centered around. Football Manager is a game series that has typically shot for realism in these aspects of like data and how much it can simulate, not necessarily how the game plays out on screen, but for years it's been one of my favorite franchises in gaming. In recent years, the game has moved to consoles, which has allowed a whole new audience the chance to play these games, which in my opinion is always a plus. However, FM26 was supposed to be the huge first step in a new direction for the series, with them moving their game over to the Unity engine, which they promised would mean a better game in the future. Main promises were a better looking match engine, new tactical approaches, women's football being added, among others, and I will say, to be fair to them, they have done some of these things well in my opinion. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of areas in which the game doesn't really feel ready, like it was rushed and forced to be released before anyone really had time to test some of these new systems, or really the game as a whole. Now, I could make a whole entire separate video talking about this game alone, but to try to keep it somewhat short for this video's sake, I think the match engine and the new tactics building are both awesome changes, and it feels like we're moving in a strong direction if you just put it on those things alone. I put 60 hours in pretty quickly in my quest to carry a small Japanese side to First Division glory, and it ended up burning myself out by the end of it. I had a lot of fun though, as the core game is still Football Manager at its heart. That being said, I do understand some of the criticisms. Well, the real ones anyways, that don't involve anti-woke grifters seeing women involved in anything and having a seizure about it. The true criticisms regarding the thousands of bugs found in the game on launch were spot on. It felt broken at times. Some players reported not even being able to load their saves once they got to a certain date. Others would be stuck at the halftime screen, unable to start kickoff for the second half, forcing them to simulate the rest of a match. I mean, the worst one for me by far was at the beginning of like the launch cycle, like first couple days in. Anytime that I would try to play the game in full screen, the match engine would slow down to a crawl and stutter, rendering the game basically unplayable. Now, luckily for me, this was addressed quickly and I was back on my grind, and I really enjoyed the game after that. But then there's the massive removal of many things that were very popular in FM24, like heat maps, and for now, international management, which is set to come back out before the World Cup. Lots of little things have been removed here and there, and while a lot of them were things that I personally didn't use, I still think it's valid for others who did use them to feel that sense of immersion has been broken because these things are missing this year. Overall, I do feel like I did and will be having fun on this game more this year, but I do think there's a lot of areas where this game does not feel like a successor to the previous title. The team has been hard at work fixing the mess they've made, but many are feeling burned by Sports Interactive, and I think that's justified. For now, for me personally, I know a lot of people would just like to dunk on this game and throw it down in poop tier. Like I said, at the core experience, and I've only played this Japanese save, I haven't played any higher teams in any of the other leagues. I was having a lot of fun, but Football Manager is a game where I think our heads make a lot of the fun for us as we're kind of filling out storylines in our heads of like, you know, youth academy players coming up and performing well and things like that. But I don't think it's a poop tier game. I don't think that it deserved to be in the bottom 10 worst reviewed games on Steam of all time, but I think that there is a lot that this game is going to need to work on to gain back trust with their fan base. For me, it's a meh tier game, but I do think that it is going to go above Rematch because I personally put more hours in, and I love Football Manager. It's hard to make me hate the game. When it wasn't working, I was super frustrated, like beyond pissed, because I was like, you know, my wife bought this for me for my birthday and I can't even play it. But once they ironed out the one bug that was affecting me, I was having fun. Now, on a more positive note, this and the next game have pretty much dominated the latter part of the year for me since I got them. Battlefield has been a series that I first got super into back with Battlefield 3. I easily had over 1,000 hours on that game with my two best friends growing up, one of which is also a content creator, King D Productions. I didn't play 4 that much, but I was still into the series back then, and Battlefield Hardline was kind of where it lost me. From there, I really didn't like any of the subsequent releases, even the super popular Battlefield 1 just wasn't a fan of. And that really sucked because I would occasionally try the newer games when they would drop in price, which was, as we all know, all the time because of how negative a lot of the opinions on the later games were, but they just never really connected with me like Battlefield 3 did. Until the beta for Battlefield 6 came out this year, and then eventually the game itself. The gunplay, in my opinion, feels pretty good, and the ability to choose any gun for any class. I mean, this game just came out swinging for me. It felt like the old Battlefield, and I have easily sank over 100 hours into this game in just the multiplayer. I did see many people felt that the story fell flat, and maybe I'll give it more of a chance to see how I feel about it, but after playing the first level, I was kind of like, whatever. But the multiplayer is just fun to play just for the sake of playing it. And I think that's as simple as it needs to be. It looks nice, it plays nice, and it feels like a game that I can just pick up and play whenever. Now, that doesn't mean it's all great. Some of the map designs are a bit frustrating, specifically the one they dropped that's in Southern California called Blackwell Fields. In me and my group's experience with this map, on the smaller objective modes, which is what we mostly play, Rush and Breakthrough, this map feels terrible on attack unless you're able to break through the first point and capture it, because there's just so much cover that the defenders have, and it's such a hard map to navigate without just getting like your head blown off every 5 seconds. There's also intermittent issues with the multiplayer search function working and then not working. There have been quite a few times where I've had to close the game and reload it because the matchmaking system would not put me into actual matchmaking, because says the party leader has to choose what the game mode is, even though I was in a party alone, so I was the leader. This issue in particular is pretty annoying. I will also say that after these 100 hours, I obviously definitely plan to keep on playing this game, but yeah, I am starting to feel a little bit burnt out, which I guess is to be expected after that long of a time. I just don't think they've had like a big enough event to really bring me back in fully yet. The last one at the time of me writing this was the cold event, where one map has cold effects that will stop you from healing back health, and eventually it will hurt you if you don't find a heat source to stand by. It was okay, but it's just not something that I would play more than a few times. All in all, the game has a really solid foundation, and while it does have its issues, I do think it deserves a spot in great games. Arc Raiders, the game that along with a certain peanut took the internet by storm in the last few months of 2025. I actually have my best friend and cousin Samoan Prince to thank for putting this game on my radar, because I wasn't even looking at it before I decided to take this risk. I never liked Escape from Tarkov, so I figured this game would not be for me, but man was I wrong. I've had this game for a couple weeks less than Battlefield, and I'm already at over 100 hours played. This game really just took over my life with its addicting gameplay loop, and it really just has that one more round feeling to it. A lot of that has to do with the community, many of which were solo lobbies, which were by far the least shoot first thinkers, which I think has been really cool to see. Now sure, trios and duos were rarely ever like this, but it is cool that many players kind of just want to get together and gather stuff and then leave the map. And that's not to say that I'm not enjoying the PvP, because I thought I would really hate the other side of this game, but the PvP is a lot of fun. There are tons of items to craft with the various materials that you gather, which makes finding the rare blueprints to make weapons even more exciting before you wedge them up your prison wallet and make for the nearest elevator. And I really do enjoy this game. While the community seems a little split on the nature of PvP and ratting and all that good stuff, I feel like this game has a solid glimpse into it of how an apocalypse would probably go. There are people out there who are traveling alone who are still good people and want to just pass in peace, and then there are those who want to stockpile everything and kill everyone, and it all kind of makes for an immersive experience. I'm excited to see what the future holds for this game, but it is really cool to have a game that's just fun to play for the sake of playing. Arc Raiders for sure is one of the best games I played this year. It has a clean look that doesn't go far outside of the realistic approach they're going for. The combat is engaging and fun, whether it's with the arcs or with other players, and the community that has sprung up around this game has been really interesting. For that, it belongs in the Game of the Year section, and that is the end of the games that you really can't finish, or games that I have put enough time into that I feel like I could rank them. Now we move on to the games I finished in the order that I beat them. Let's not forget to put Arc Raiders up there. The last game I finished in 2024 was Cyberpunk 2077, and so it probably makes sense based on how much I loved that game that the first game that I finished, well, I guess large DLC that I finished this year, is Cyberpunk's Phantom Liberty expansion. It might be a little cheap to consider this beating a game, but it did feel like this added a significant amount to the base game through its new weapons, storyline, area, and characters. This expansion and the full game of Cyberpunk really made me glad that I put off playing these games for so long, as I got to enjoy this entire series of content with little to no issues, and it was a blast. Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty's setting of a city within a city was impressive, and Dogtown felt like a completely different beast to Night City. At the gates, you can literally hear police officers arguing over whether or not to pursue a suspect into Dogtown, and the more senior officer tells his partner that it's not worth it. That really kind of sets the tone for this expansion and how dangerous of a place this new area is. The story follows an undercover, spy, political espionage kind of plot line, and it has a lot of cool missions and set pieces, especially when you are a stealth build like I was. Ultimately, it was a lot of fun, and further cemented how strong of an IP Cyberpunk is. Easy Game of the Year tier for me. Okay, a little bit of a spicy take here. I'm not going to linger on it too much. I'm just going to say that the story of Alan Wake Remastered is really good, but this remake felt buggy and ugly as hell. I don't know what it is, but from what I've seen, the original 360 release looks more human than this weird Uncanny Valley Skinwalker version of the game. I was also not a huge fan of the gameplay, just being honest, with some of the resource management feeling a bit unfair to the amount of enemies thrown your way, and your flashlight gun combo being the main way to hurt them. We can just chalk that up to me being ass at video games, sure, but this is my list, and I gotta say, I really only suffered through this game to play the second one, and that probably had some factor in my overall disdain for this game. Because of the story and legacy, I'm not gonna go bottom poop tier, but just know it was close. And in crazy juxtaposition to the last entry, and this game's predecessor, Alan Wake 2 is easily one of the best games I have ever played. The story is mind-bending and interesting, the voice acting and sound design are crisp and clear. It's a beautifully dark game with some really nerve-wracking moments. This game is dope, and if you have not played it, you really should. It's tense and weird in all the right ways, and it really does make suffering through the remake worth every second to see how this game played out and to have that full story context. This game works on every single level, and I'm thankful that friend of the channel and cousin, once again mentioning Simone Prince, recommended it to me. The story and atmosphere hooked me immediately, the intensity and horror are dialed up to make the encounters feel pretty spooky as I failed to constantly manage my ammo. I know that was a big complaint for me in the first one, but this one felt like it was more of me being asked than it kind of just feeling unfair at points. Man, I love this game. It is excellent. I can't say much else without spoiling something, so you already know where it's going. It's one of the best games I played this year. No, ahead of Cyberpunk, please. Okay, we got it. Okay, Monster Hunter World. This was a little game that I played quite a few times before and even beaten once back when it released, but me and my group of buddies returned to it in anticipation of Monster Hunter Wild's release. It was a lot of fun to go back, and while this game does take some time to get going, once you're in the full swing of things and all of its systems and going on hunts with your friends, it really does shine. The fights are fierce and intense. I love the monster designs in this game, and it was really nice to be able to approach this with a fresh mind. Instead of my trusty hammer, I learned Hunting Horn, which has since become my favorite Monster Hunter weapon. It was overall a really fun time with friends, and the gameplay loop of hunting things over and over to collect armor and weapons is really addicting. Now, I have gone back to this since playing Wilds. I do find it to be pretty slow without the Sacred and without some of the other quality of life things they've changed. I know that people feel differently about that. Some people feel like to make the game easier is to make it too approachable, and other people feel like it should be more approachable to bring more people in. I just want the game to be faster paced than World can be sometimes. Running to every fight, even though the maps are smaller, is a little bit of a slog, and I enjoy being able to sharpen my weapon on the back of the Sacred and stuff, so going back to it, you know, it made it feel a little bit worse, but I still think it's a great game. It definitely deserves to be up there in great games. Now, next up is Pokemon Yellow version. Pokemon is a series that I realized that I have played a ton of games in. It's one of my favorite series of all time, but I've actually finished very few of them. So I decided to go back and right this wrong this year and get through some Pokemon games when I had the itch to catch them all, and Yellow was a really nostalgic time despite it not being my first Pokemon game that I ever played. I actually prefer this version to the Red and Blue games, as Pikachu as the starter is a bit of a challenge, which is offset by being able to get all 3 starters throughout the game, but I had a really great time returning to the beginning of one of my favorite series. Now, it's definitely aged a bit since its release, and I think that while it's still playable for those who are looking for something to jog that nostalgia, it is rough, don't get me wrong. Something about the Game Boy graphics are just kind of like that monochrome can be a little off-putting, and some of the sprite designs, I think they're a little rough. It's rough. Anyone who wants to go back to the beginning of the series to kind of see where its roots are, it's definitely playable. And I think this one is good to go in the good game section. Next up is another Pokemon game that I've never finished, and it was actually my first time playing the original Johto games. I have played and beaten Heart Gold, but I gotta say, the Game Boy Color version really had its charm. While I felt like Pokemon Yellow sprites were pretty rough and the monochrome kind of style of the graphics from the Game Boy, like black and white style, was pretty rough on the eyes at times, Pokemon Crystal and these second gen games are gorgeous with just the slight change of adding color. The sprite work and changing colors as you travel from one area to the next are really nostalgic, and overall this game is just full of content, especially for the time it released in. This is also when Pokemon games still featured some amount of challenge to them, and I'm not gonna lie, I had to grind quite a bit here and there, especially to overcome the Elite Four. The Pokemon variety is pretty good too, because the Kanto region is basically all the post-game content, and while it is a personal note, I just have a lot of love for the Johto Pokemon. With my feelings towards the more modern Pokemon games being lukewarm at best, Pokemon Crystal reminded me of why I fell in love with the series in the first place. This game's aesthetic is gorgeous. I genuinely enjoyed playing this game. Like I said, my friends would find me on REPO hiding in barrels and stuff just to play this game. Yeah, this is easily one of the best games I played this year for sure. Pokemon Sapphire is the next game that I finished, and I know what you're all thinking. Why didn't you play Emerald, Ploop? What are you, some kind of poop collector bad man? And to that I have to say, whatever I may or may not collect in my spare time is my business, and I chose Sapphire this time around because it was the first Pokemon game I ever played. I got this for Christmas when I was 9 or 10 years old, and it started me on what would be one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. I was already into the anime and the cards and everything else Pokemon, but this was the first game I played outside of the Pokemon Stadium games. I don't think this is as strong of an entry as Crystal. Emerald is probably up there, but Sapphire kind of lacks the post-game content to run through. But that being said, I still really enjoyed my time going back to the first traditional Pokemon game I ever played and finally beating it, something that I've actually never done. The sprite work still holds up after all these years, the music is beautiful and really brings back memories, and the Pokemon selection and difficulty are still up there with some of my favorites. This is a pretty good game. I think it fits a little bit ahead of Yellow. I'm not going to spend too much time here on milk outside of a bag of milk, as the game was like less than an hour long, and overall, I didn't really like it. So what I will say is that the art style is pretty to look at, and the songs that I do remember from it were kind of eerie and creepy to listen to. A lot of the sound design is decent, but that's about it as far as good things I have to say about it. I honestly didn't really get this one, and maybe that's a failure on my part on understanding it, but it didn't vibe with me at all, and the story just kind of fell flat. I'm just being honest here, I mostly forgot what this game was even about because it just was not memorable for me at all. I didn't like it as much as the first game in the series, and while I didn't hate it, I just kind of found it to be sort of whatever. Meh, definitely for me. Now, next up is Bramble the Mountain King. This was a game that friend of the channel Backpack Comics played quite some time ago, and I remember the glimpse I caught of it reminded me of Little Nightmares, a game series that my wife and I are pretty fond of. Bramble was a cool take on that genre that interjected the Little Nightmares platforming and eerie dark tone of those games with some Norse and Scandinavian folklore. It follows a super interesting and pretty dark and disturbing story that clawed its way into my heart the more I played it. Sure, it can be a little rough around the edges, but the tale that it tells is well worth the playtime, and I really enjoyed the themes of overcoming impossible odds and the David versus Goliath kind of enemies that our young protagonist faces. The sound design and music were excellent, the art style was at times a beautiful vignette of scenery and warmth, and at others a haunting and intensely dark hellscape that we're just trying to survive in. This is a really good game, and I think it fits nicely in the good games tier. So I'm going to put it between the two Pokemon games, I think. Sons of the Forest, a sequel that I waited a while to play, but one that I was super hyped for. Now, this is a game that I was super excited for back when it was announced because of how much my friends and I loved the original Forest game. It was one of the games that taught me keyboard and mouse, as I found it just frantic enough to be scary, but because it was not a PvP survival game, it gave me that space to learn. We knew where most of the weapons would drop in the original game, and sometimes those of us who had played a lot of it would run our friends that were new to the game through to see how fast we could gather all the good tools and weapons and make it to the end. And so we were all super excited to play the sequel to one of our favorite co-op games, and I would say that Sons of the Forest is a fine game on its own, if not a little safe for a sequel, which I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with. Now, I don't really think they changed too much from the first game's formula, and at its core, this is still very much the same game. You and maybe some friends build and survive while uncovering the mysteries of the forest, all while battling and evading dangerous mutants that come in even more shapes and sizes this time around. There are some new things to the game, like new enemy types, new buildings, new tools, but overall this is really just the forest, which my group was fine with and we had a fun time. I don't get the feeling that we'll be going back to this one like we did with the first one because of those feelings of been there, done that. But overall, the game was a solid outing. The story was pretty crazy, and it made for some unexpected twists towards the end. I am still looking forward to the third one that they announced at the Game Awards, but overall, I just think this was like a pretty good game. Alright, Celeste. As we go along here, you will notice that I played a decent amount of difficult games, which was a big theme for me this year. The first of these games was Celeste, a difficult platformer that has sat in my backlog for a pretty long time. I decided to challenge my disinterest in these intentionally difficult games, and I picked up Celeste to go through first, and I was pretty horrible at it. I don't remember how many times I died, but it was a ton. And the game was still a lot of fun to play. The game is surprisingly precise and reactive, which I guess makes sense in a game where the slightest miscalculation can lead you to death. I really like the story and the simple but beautiful pixel art style, as well as the soundtrack, which I found to be a great companion to the intensity of some of the gameplay. This was the beginning of my journey with more difficult games, and I slowly started to build that understanding that with every death, I was learning something, which then I would carry into a few other games on this list. Celeste is a really pretty game with a lot of heart and a challenging difficulty level, and it is a great game. Now, continuing my interest in difficult games but from a totally different genre came by way of Bloodborne. I've had this game in my PS4 collection since it launched, and the furthest I've ever gotten was the Shadow of Yharnam boss fight, in which you take on 3 enemies at the same time. After I got sucked in this game, it sat on my shelf for the next decade or so as I constantly tried and bounced off of the Souls-like genre and finally became convinced that it was just not for me. And then while riding on the high of overcoming Celeste's mountainous climb, I decided to give this genre one last go. And for some reason, it finally clicked. I got back to the Shadows of Yharnam fight once more and remembered all those times they stomped out my interest in the genre, and after dying again and again and again and again and again, I finally overcame this boss fight and felt that sweet dopamine hit that made me finally understand. The feeling of finally putting these 3 down was one of the best feelings I've ever had while playing a video game. I actually thought I was going to stroke out with how fast my heart was racing. But yeah, the rest of the game was still a pretty tough challenge for me, but finally rolling those credits was amazing, and I instantly became a fan of the genre that I had stayed away from for so long. Bloodborne's dark and twisted world, the awesome boss designs, and the cool and varied weapon types were all huge reasons why my interest really stuck for this game in particular, and I still watch lore videos about the world of this game because it's just so interesting to learn about. Easily one of the best games I've not only just played this year, but probably of all time. I am going to be tackling the DLC within the next year for sure. But yeah, Bloodborne, straight to the top of best games I played this year. Liza P is the next game that I beat, and once again I continued my momentum in playing through these games that I missed out on. A whole new world kind of opened up to me after beating Bloodborne, and it was such a cool feeling to go back through and try all these games out. Liza P was a game that Mrs. Ploop wanted me to play for a very long time based on its art style alone, and so she bought it for me on Valentine's Day of 2025 so I could finally get around to it. This was the first parry-centered game that I had ever played in this style, obviously, and it took a lot of getting used to. And other games that feature parrying, because let's be real, a lot of Souls-like games, or not even, do at this point, I have historically been pretty balls at that mechanic. Once again, this game challenged me quite a bit. There were times where I felt like I would never progress, like with the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, once again, another multiple boss fight. But that feeling of overcoming something tough just really stuck with me and propelled me all the way to the end of this game. I really love the world of Krot, and Liza P has quickly become one of my favorite video games of all time through its fascinating world building, emotional storytelling, and excellent boss design. Its overall presentation is just beautiful, and the parry system has become my favorite type of these kind of games, and this will not be the last parry-based game on this list. Liza P is a great Souls-like game, and it deserves to be among the best games that I played this year. Literally the definition of you deserve it all. If you're a French debut turn-based game with one of the best parties and stories I've ever played, this is for you. Arrest me, Clair Obscur. Okay, in all seriousness though, if you have not played this game and you're even remotely interested, please go out and buy it for yourself. It's worth the price tag 2 times over in my opinion. The voice cast is just superb. Some of the crispiest writing and lines on this side of the Mississippi. The combat system is a great take on turn-based JRPG style combat, and while Sandfall certainly did not invent the idea of adding some form of timing-based mechanic to turn-based games, they did it very well. This game is gorgeous. The soundtrack is one of the best I have ever heard. Listen, I'm not going to glaze this game anymore because we all have heard how great it is. We all have heard the yearly ball and gun gamers cry about how it didn't deserve all of its praise. We've heard all of that. It is a generational game. It is one of the very best RPGs I have ever played. Another easy addition to the best games of the year, and in fact, it was one of the best games I've ever played. Yeah, I glazed it a little more. I lied. Get over it. I really love the way Bethesda just substantiated all of the rumors and leaks about Oblivion Remastered and then just dropped it on the same day. This was such a nostalgic return to my favorite Elder Scrolls game, and I really like that they kept the game underneath all the visual upgrades the same, or better or worse. This was my first foray into Elder Scrolls back on the PS3 when my grandma told me about a game she had been watching my uncle play. She took me to GameStop that day and bought me the original Oblivion release, and I easily sank hundreds of hours into that game. So to return to the game whose story is about the big fight between good and evil, light and darkness, with side quests and guild quest lines that were interesting and varied, each with their own payoff and sometimes fun little twists, was just a great time that reminded me of simpler days. I also found that I had far more patience when I approached this game this time around, and would make role-playing decisions like limiting my fast traveling, stopping at inns and taverns, and making sure that my character ate daily, all of which just really led me to reigniting my love for Oblivion. Now, some of the older issues still exist, as the team who worked on this basically just put a fresh visual makeover on top of what is the original Oblivion game, but some of that jank is why we love older games. I appreciate this making an older title more accessible, and if you have not played Oblivion, I can highly recommend it for anyone who enjoys those first-person RPGs that Prime Bethesda knocked out of the park. I think that Oblivion fits nicely up there with the other great games this year. So, Devil May Cry is a series that I have always wanted to return to, as I had only ever beaten the 3rd and 4th games before, and 2025 was the year that I finally did that. The first Devil May Cry game held up really well and was very enjoyable in my opinion. Sure, it was a little clunky and janky at times, but the combat offered a high-speed and satisfying combo-based system that made its relatively short runtime packed with high-octane fun. The soundtrack was also full of great and equally high-energy hardcore guitar-backed songs to match the stylish art of demon slaying. The visuals have obviously aged quite a bit, but it's not like unplayable by any means. And also, this kind of stuff happened.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Yeah, the line and delivery and writing is all very cringe and entertaining at times, which really helped it carry that old PS2 feel. I'm going to put this in the good games tier, as I don't think it's up there with the best games of the series, but it's by no means a bad game at all. Trash, moving on. Thank God we got away from that trash fire and back onto peak gaming with this game that has, as of now, rounded out the Devil May Cry saga very well. The presentation was another high mark for this game, a reoccurring theme for most of the series, but this game in particular takes it up to a whole nother level. The visuals are stunning, as are the character designs, the voice acting, the soundtrack. You guys know how Devil May Cry is. It is stylish to its core. The corny one-liners that Dante says still make him lovable as he tears through enemies with various weapons from the series. The sections as the Fragile V, where you have to rely on his summons to defend you, and the Nero sections where you use different mechanical hand upgrades that have been added to his arsenal to replace his lost demon hand. Each of the characters has a unique and varied gameplay element that is still tied together by that stellar, fast-paced combat. This game is excellent, and it is frequently on crazy sales, which just represents so much value for the money you could spend on one of the best games in not only this series, but one of the most fun action RPGs of all time. So let's just call it what it is. It was one of the best games I played this year, for sure. Final Fantasy X was the first Final Fantasy game I ever played after I got it for Christmas on my PS2 back when I was a kid. I'm not totally sure where I saw it, but I remember seeing one of the cutscenes on maybe X-Play or something back then, and I asked for both Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy XII that year, and I got them both. Both have been games that I've nearly finished at different points in my life, and 2025 was finally the year that I finished up the game that started it all for me with Final Fantasy. This has become my favorite video game of all time, as I really came to love the emerging love story happening in the background of this dark world known as Spira. While this game may be linear for most of its runtime, I guess nearly all of it really, I still loved getting from story bit to story bit as this group supported Yuna on her journey to stop the World Destroyer's sin. There is so much emotion at the center of this game, and everything within it adds to that emotion. The characters may be goofy and cringe at times, but the writing has a lot of heart put into it. Topics like religion and traditionalism are challenged by Tidus, who is essentially isekai'd into this world, and he represents a world so foreign to the other characters where people relied so heavily on Machina with no fear of repercussions. A lot of his part to play in this game is to challenge the idea of doing things that don't make sense just because we've always done things this way. And while I did find him cringe-inducing at first, by the end of it I really love Tidus and what he brings to this title. His interactions and relationships with each member of the party are just so well done, and he has a unique role to all of them. To Yuna, he is a safe place, a protector, and a love interest. To Waka and Lulu, he is the little brother they lost. To Orin, he is the best friend's son and mentee. To Riku, he is a fellow goober. And to Kamari, he is an annoyance, but by the end of the game, even Kamari values Tidus for his loyalty to Yuna. And that isn't even mentioning the character designs bringing that not necessarily sensical, but swag dripped out Tetsuya Nomura vibe, and the absolutely brilliant soundtrack done in part by legendary composer of Final Fantasy titles, Nobuo Uematsu. To Xanarkand is still one of my favorite soundtrack songs of all time, and that's never going to change. It's a beautiful piano piece that really encapsulates this game and its themes. Final Fantasy X is my favorite video game of all time for its gorgeous presentation, excellent story, and really fun, true turn-based combat. It has some issues with some of the writing being a bit dated, but overall it is a near perfect game as you can get in my book, so you already know where this is going. Oh, yeah, that's where it's going. Well, this one's gonna be awkward. I went into this with an open mind after seeing countless people on YouTube and Instagram Reels saying that Final Fantasy II just got hate on because people didn't want a story without Tidus, and other people saying how people who hate this game just hate women. So I made sure I drank a ton of Respect Women juice for the day, and I went in with a lot of hope. I was excited to see how many other people were hyping this game up. And while I was in the middle of beating Final Fantasy X, I was like, well, at least the second game is better than I thought it was going to be. And I was bummed that I did not agree with their feelings. I felt betrayed by all these promises that it fit alongside 10 as a good addition to the series. Now, maybe in isolation, this game wouldn't be a bad turn-based RPG, but when the context of the prior game is present, the tonal shift here was just way too jarring for me, to say the least. It's not that it doesn't necessarily make sense. I mean, the big boss fight at the end of the first game for things to be, you know, a bit more peaceful and lighthearted, but the huge jump from a sort of tragic love story in a world as beautiful as it is scarred to a girls trip where the seriousness is pretty much turned all the way down just really was not for me. Now, there were some positives. It was cool to see the world rebuilding after the events of the first game and checking in with some of the other party members throughout the game. Also, the dress sphere combat system was pretty cool, and it was a way to kind of honor the job systems of the past while still kind of making it a unique thing. Unfortunately though, that's where my praise is going to end for this game. I don't think it's a poop tier game, but it certainly cannot be higher than meh. Oh, and I didn't count the audio drama Final Fantasy X will on this list because it's trash and it undid everything great about the first game and actually the satisfying ending of the second game. That shit is garbage. Anyways, Final Fantasy X-2 is meh tier even with my consumed Respect Women juice. Sorry girlies, I just did not like this one. It goes in meh. Probably above Rematch, but under Football Manager. Dude, this list is so cursed. It's like Football Manager 26 is definitely better. I mean, I get like I'm trying to put these in like the order of how I enjoyed them, but it is funny to just like put these two games against each other. Do I like the girls more or do I like Football Manager more? I don't know. Make what you want of it. I don't care. I already mentioned how 2025 was the year of Souls and Souls-likes for me, and how Lies of P with its Victorian, kind of French, I don't really know what you want to call it, steampunk aesthetic, parry-based combat, and excellent story quickly became one of my favorite video games of all time. So when one of my best friends and I were watching the Sony State of Play and the DLC was released right then and there, we were on it immediately. And wow, what a treat it was. This was so difficult for me when I first attempted it because I was on New Game Plus 2 that the basic enemies were basically hitting me for around 75% of my health when I first started playing it. It was actually so difficult, in fact, that the team had to come out with a patch to fix some of the difficulty settings because the normal Lies of P difficulty setting was cranked up to 11. But this DLC was a beautiful and tragic ending to my time with Lies of P for this year. The story takes place back in time as the main character finds himself in Crop before the events of the main title, and it follows him as he trails behind two dear friends who are on the hunt to stop an infamous killer. The narrative told here is tense, focused, and really an excellent way to end this title with a bang. The new weapon additions were varied and each brought with it a bunch of flashy new moves. The bosses were a ton of frustratingly fun encounters for me to slowly just lose my sanity to, but the narrative here is what made it one of the best games or expansions I have played this year, and it really solidified Lies of P as one of my favorite video games of all time. So it's going to go up here in one of the best games I played, right next to Lies of P. That's right after Lies of P's DLC, I decided to give Elden Ring another shot, and as I had technically finished it with a ton of help before, I just felt like that didn't count. I gotta say, as someone who finally got into this genre, I had heard a lot about how this game was one of the easier Souls games to break into, and while that was true for me after playing a few earlier in the year, this game was by no means easy for me to finish. I appreciated being able to run off into the world and explore and grind up levels to take on incoming boss fights, and the open world that was packed with bits of lore to discover through items and places. It was just really cool. I know they do that in a lot of these games. I specifically liked it in Elden Ring a lot. I love the lands between and how, like other FromSoft titles, these places were once a beautiful place with a horrifying undertone that over time crept from under the mask of beauty and became this monstrous face that was left behind. The combat is pretty fluid, and it's the classic dodge roll, attack, don't get greedy cycle that has been in a lot of these games. But most of the bosses were really cool and exciting to encounter from both a design and combat perspective. Just for instance, Radahn's massive body levitating over his tiny loyal steed made me wonder about the lore and what that was, And finding out that he literally just learned gravity magic so he didn't have to leave his horse behind was such an interesting take that reminded me a lot of writing fantasy fiction. A lot of times when you're world building and writing, especially about magic systems and what purpose they serve as a plot device, is kind of more of the focus, more so than just having cool magic powers for the sake of having them. This thought to use gravity magic to make himself lighter in a way that his horse, while still suffering most likely, could carry him into battle still as his mind deteriorated was just brilliant to me. And this is just one example of the amount of thought that goes into these characters and their lore. Yeah, Elden Ring is an amazing game. It deserves all its praise. It's one of the best Souls experiences I have ever had, and I'm looking forward to tackling the DLC this year, probably after Bloodborne's. Truly one of the best games of the year and of all time. I'm not going to spend too much time on Nightreign here because most of what I said about Elden Ring kind of still applies to this game. The main gameplay components as far as combat goes are obviously very similar to the main game, and while there is a story there, kind of like for each character, and an overall story that's going on in the background, it's something that I wasn't super interested in, but who knows, that may change as I dive back into this again this year. The main pull for this game is its co-op centered matches in which players team up with squads of up to 3 players and go out onto a large map and fight enemies, gather items and armor and weapons, and level up to better their loadout, and something similar to kind of a battle royale kind of loop. Now, it's not really a battle royale, there's no PvP here, and I'm not usually a huge fan of those kind of games, but I thought it actually worked surprisingly well here with Nightreign. Running through those different days on the map with friends and taking on bosses both new and old was really a lot of fun. Trying to max out your loadout as much as you can before the big final boss fight at the end of the 3-day cycle is a good bit of stress because should it not happen, it's easy to just get completely shit on if you walk in there. Thanks for all the carrying you guys did for me, fellas. I still don't know how to build my loadout super well in this game, but we did eventually clear all of the main bosses in the original release, and it was a ton of fun to play a dedicated co-op experience in the Elden Ring universe. Now, I will say that I didn't enjoy this as much as the main game, and I think that maybe comes down to it feeling a bit watered down, but I get that a big story-heavy game like the first game was not the aim for this, and this was really more about the multiplayer aspect of the game. This was a way for FromSoft to reuse some assets and keep costs down while still offering what is a fun experience to run through with a good group of friends, and I don't think it's trying to be something as big as the first game. I think it was simply trying to gauge interest in a dedicated multiplayer game done by this company, and so as such it feels like a lesser version of Elden Ring in some ways, but also its own unique experience in others. Overall, I think the unique and varied playstyles of each of the classes, or characters if you want to call them that, and the multiplayer alone made this a lot of fun, and I think that people who enjoy these kind of games will like Nightreign. I think it's a great game with a lot of replay value that is totally worth its sticker price. I think because of that, I'm going to put it in, I would say probably great games, and I would probably put it probably under Oblivion. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed Oblivion. Death Stranding is a game that I had gotten from my dad that sat on my shelf for quite some time. It was always kind of in the back of my mind, and at one point I had given it a go, but I got burnt out by the main gameplay mechanic being walking and trying not to topple over while basically being an Amazon delivery guy. With the hugely anticipated sequel that was set to come out in 2025, I finally decided to sit down and play this before it launched so I could get caught up on what this game actually was. And I'm glad that I did. The game was such a unique and odd experience, and finally giving it a chance and breaking into this universe was one of the best gaming choices I made this year. The quality of the presentation alone is amazing, with each actor putting in the work to really make this world feel emotional and lived in. The story took turns I was never expecting, and it really made some of the more sluggish periods of gameplay worth it to learn just a little bit more about what is actually going on here. And yes, there were times where it did feel like I was forcing myself to push through a game that I was not going to like. This game is not for everyone, and I think the joke I made with my friends constantly was that I had to gaslight myself into pushing through it for 13 hours to avoid burning out again. The gameplay can be a real chore sometimes, especially in the later portions where you're trudging through snow and walking at a snail's pace, but eventually I did start to get it, and it clicked that the journey to these places was a part of what was important. They were mostly peaceful walks through an America that has been left shattered by the Death Stranding event, but it was still somehow beautiful. Just the lush greens of grass and moss alone were something I remember really sticking with me about how this world was designed. Yeah, the world is broken and beautiful, and it really pulled me in, and once I stopped seeing the gameplay as being in my way of the story, it really just clicked for me. It felt mentally quieting to just walk through the mud and difficult terrain and feet of snow. I think somewhere inside my brain, overcoming these obstacles was really helping me work on stuff in my mind that I had just kind of never really had a quiet time to think about. I'm not trying to be dramatic or anything. I'm just saying that I think the main reason I started to enjoy it was that it gave me kind of like quiet time to just like think. Now this is a great game from a cinematic, presentation, storytelling, and world building standpoint, but I can see that the gameplay is going to be really divisive, and it almost made me put it down because 13 hours is a tough sell for most people to push through. And that's not even to say that that would be what time period it would start to be fun for you. It can be slow and frustrating and disheartening at times, and I imagine that that's probably how Sam Bridges would feel when these assholes in charge tell him to backtrack through hours of gameplay on foot. Vehicles were less than helpful as they oftentimes get stuck on the smallest rocks on your path, and combat is really just better avoided for the most part as it's clunky and it just leads to some big losses or damages to your packages. Also, the story and world are kind of just everywhere at the beginning of this game, and I can see that being off-putting for a lot of people. They're constantly throwing new terms at you like dooms, BTs, BBs, and everyone who's helping you is being named stuff like Die Hard Man, Dead Man, Heart Man, Mama. So like this on top of like the gameplay being as slow as it can be sometimes, it makes sense that a lot of people bounce off this game initially. Now, eventually all these things get explained, but the game is for sure a patient, slow burn kind of approach. Overall, I do think it's a good game. It almost, on story alone, breaches the great game territory, but even I will admit the gameplay was really boring to me at some points. So, because of that, I think it belongs in the good games. Okay, Death Stranding 2 was a big game that I was originally not anticipating getting at launch, but the more I saw about it, the more interested I became. As I said, I played the first one leading up to this release, and overall, it felt like it was a good, if not a bit slow game for me. This game is admittedly mostly more of the same, but a lot of these systems have been completely overhauled and rethought to make them way more engaging and way less obstructive to the story. Vehicles, for instance, are far better in this game as they're able to actually off-road with quite a bit of success, making building them worth the time and resources even if the roads near you aren't paved. Combat is far more fluid and fun, making the action parts of this game way more enjoyable than the first game. The stealth has also been overhauled to make it a far more practical and worthwhile approach to taking on loads of enemies at once. I mean, even the environment now features a weather cycle and day and night times, which change how you navigate the world and where to anticipate BTs on your delivery routes. At its core, the main gameplay components are still there, but many if not all of them have been done much better. The story is also a lot easier to follow this time around, and yeah, a lot of it was my familiarity with all the terms that they throw at you in the first game, but I did feel like this game did a better job of keeping the story easy to follow. It still has its moments where it gets ridiculous and even funny how random it can just be, but when it wants to, this game gets emotional. It's also loaded with secret little Easter eggs you can find, and I mean, the first game had a lot of like actor cameos and stuff, but there's more of that in this game, and I think that those little things you just find sometimes that are not mandatory are just so cool. And like, it's just one of those kind of games where like exploration is rewarded with little things. This game is beautiful in a way that it can throw some ridiculous ass stuff your way that almost feels out of place, but then draw you right back into the seriousness of it all. It's also, on record right now, the only game that has ever made me cry. Like, ugly cry, pause the cutscene and take a break kind of cry. I love Death Stranding 2, and it felt like the team hit the ground running this time and carried themselves with the momentum of the first title. This is easily one of the best games I played this year. I said that a lot. I mean, a lot of these are easily the best games I've played. Fire Emblem is another childhood game that I never got around to beating that really solidified my love for the series. This, like Pokemon, is another case of one of those series that I've played a ton of games in, but not really beaten any of them. In Fire Emblem's case, I actually don't think I've ever beat any of them. So with my steadily growing love of the Game Boy Advance and returning to this console, I found it to be yet another nostalgic banger in its catalog. It's a classic Fire Emblem experience where you build up an army of characters with unique backgrounds and personalities and hair colors, and their charming anime art style designs. The story is a pretty basic but serviceable good versus evil plot, and the three lords at the center of our forces are all unique and interesting people with very different vibes and styles. Eliwood is the prince, and he's all honor and cool, and he's got a little rapier sword. And then Hector is like the brash, let's rush in and not think about anything, I got a big old axe, shoot shoot. And then Lynn is like the tribal samurai sword wielding, like she's just kind of badass. I like Lynn a lot. But yeah, that's like the three people. They're all very different. They all have different experiences and different things they bring to the narrative table. Combat is that classic Fire Emblem strategy style where you move characters on an overworld map, and the main mechanic is the weapon triangle of strengths and weaknesses.
The art style, gameplay, and soundtrack all work well together and making this an RPG that has stood the test of time. As a portable game that you can pick up and go anytime, this game offers a pretty long playtime that I slowly chiseled away at over the course of a few weeks. It never really lost that initial appeal to me, and the story, while being a bit basic, was interesting, and combined with the engaging heroes to control and level them up and get that cool like transformation that a lot of them do with their class, it just really had a lot of payoff that I enjoyed quite a bit. I was really happy to check off the first and only Fire Emblem game that I have finished to date, and it's the first one that I've ever played, so that was kind of nice. So yeah, it's a good game with a bit of a predictable plotline that makes for an overall game that fits in good games. Around the time I started Astrobot, I was feeling burnt out on the constant stream of story games that I had played all year. I love large narrative focused games, it's what I play the most of, but after so many in a row, I was really finding myself trying new games and immediately dropping them as I struggled to break into their stories. And the cure for this ended up being Astrobot. This was a game that I was on the fence about getting for a while despite it having such great reviews, but I'm not really the biggest platformer fan. I am really glad that I picked this up though after finding a used copy and giving it a go, because this game is excellent. It feels like it's a celebration of PlayStation's history. You play as Astrobot as he tries to put his PS5 shaped spaceship back together through exploring worlds and gathering components. Along the way, you will find tons of other bots, many of them with skins themed around different PlayStation exclusives from over the years. There's also levels that use specific PlayStation IPs as their worlds, and those are awesome too, as it gives you a chance to play as Kratos, Nathan Drake, and more, each with their own unique ability to help you traverse the level. The level design is excellent, with tons of cool ideas using PlayStation accessories like the PSVR being used to slow time down, or the PS5 controller being the smaller spaceship for Astrobot to planet hop with. I enjoyed this game so much that it was one of the few games that I platinumed this year. For me, it refreshed my enjoyment in video games entirely and gave me something that was just pure fun to break up all of the larger games I played. I think it definitely belongs in the Games of the Year category for that reason alone. So yeah, I was pretty late to Ghost of Tsushima. I've owned it for a while, and just like with Death Stranding, I've never really got around to it. But I am glad that I finally did, because this game is as great as everyone says it is. I think the story being set around this Mongol invasion of this island of Tsushima, and how Jin finds himself breaking his samurai code of honor to even the playing field with them, makes for such an entertaining and intense narrative. It was really cool to see him struggle with making decisions that would dishonor his family name and him as a warrior, but how he weighs that against the foes that are literally conquering all of his homeland and using that exact honor code against them because it makes them predictable. Jin is a great main character for this, and it just adds a ton of depth to his story and personality, and as you watch him kind of struggle with this balance, and his transformation into the ghost leaves just as many favoring him as fearing and denouncing him. The combat is a mix of a rock, paper, scissors system in which choosing different stances allows Jin to more effectively deal with various enemy weapon types, and using a combination of his samurai training and ghost skills to challenge camps and take down warlords, which is satisfying. The world itself is gorgeous, with a ton of beautiful colors used in its palette. The different locations that pop up on screen as you ride on, beaches or through forests or alongside beautiful fields of flowers that sway in the wind. There is a ton of just vibrant colors here. There were times when the gameplay loop would get a bit similar to Far Cry, in which you just take down forts, liberate areas, and then it kind of does become a little bit stale when you're going for a platinum. But if I take that grind aside and just take it for the runtime of the narrative alone, Ghost of Tsushima is an excellent game that I think goes up there with the best games that I played this year. We finally arrived at my favorite Souls, or Souls-like, you know what I mean, these kind of games. Sekiro is my favorite one of them. This game was so much fun, and I'm really glad that I played it after Lies of P, because that game sort of prepared me for the parry-based gameplay. Although I will say that one of the things that sets Sekiro apart is just how damn good that parrying feels in this game. Sword fights with the big bosses of this game feel more like methodical duels, where most swings are met by a responding swing and a block until you kind of get that rhythm down and find a way through their guard. It's a system that I just found to be so responsive, and while it was frustrating at some points, it did feel fair, and once I learned the pattern of a boss through trial and error, pulling off some of those sequences of parries where I would take no damage just went so fucking hard. The story is extremely interesting, as most of From Software's outings are, though this one is a bit more upfront than other games from this developer. Sekiro still looks pretty amazing too, and its overall presentation between the nice visuals and excellent sound design made for an even more enjoyable experience. All the bosses had pretty cool designs for the most part, and there was a lot of variation to them. I mean, at one point you're fighting like a monkey being controlled by a parasite. Then there's like human enemies that you fight that are fighting you with katanas. And a lot of these fights are just so satisfying, especially when you learn over time. I love this game. I think it will be hard for any other action game in this vein to dethrone it for me. And it was super easy for me to just chuck this up there with the best games of the year. So yeah, it's gonna go right in front of Bloodborne. Now, Monster Hunter Wilds is an interesting case as far as where I wanted to put it. I'm by no means a hater of this game. I know a lot of people understandably did not see this game in the best light due to its really poor launch state and lack of optimization on PC. I never experienced this myself because I buy most of the games that I want to collect on PS5. I enjoy physical media. So I do that with like all the big RPGs for the most part. That being said, a few of my buddies did struggle to run this game when it first came out, but that has gotten better over time with the updates. Still, another AAA title that's 70 buckos just for it to run like absolute turds is never a good thing. Aside from that, the game is really fun, but it does have some issues, namely the connectivity issues as well as the multiplayer experience and joining friends for hunts. For Wilds, I was really hoping that the crossplay aspect and the way they advertised how easy co-op would be would just like they would kind of made it a bit easier to find your friends and add them to a lobby. And while me and mine have obviously gotten this down after playing the game for more than 100 hours, it is kind of annoying to see that this is a co-op game first and foremost, and it's still kind of convoluted to like get people all together at like when you first start playing. It's obviously like easy once you figure it out, but it's not like just as easy as like, you know, I feel like it could be so much easier than the way that it works sometimes. And then on top of that, there's like the connectivity issues of like kicking people out of link parties that still happens today. So it's like somewhat better to be in like a squad lobby. There's just like a lot of hoops I feel like you have to jump through. And so maybe if the connectivity issues weren't as bad, like it wouldn't be that big of a deal that it's kind of convoluted to add your friends like to your hunter thing and then to a link party so that you can join quests. Like all those hoops to jump through are kind of irritating. Now, even aside from just joining people on hunts, this co-op game feels like sometimes it doesn't want you to play co-op because it will just kick you out in the middle of a hunt and then not let you join back. I will say, at least when this does happen, it doesn't just end the quest and like ruin and waste time. It just splits into a solo hunt that is already like in progress for the players who get booted from the session. But it is still super annoying nonetheless. I mean, that's pretty much all the bad I have to say about this game, though. Monster Hunter Wilds is more of that Monster Hunter World kind of vibe in terms of its like quality and aesthetic. It still looks great, and the big particle effect heavy monster attacks look awesome when they shoot their beams, flames, or even the water jet thing looks pretty cool from the Mizutsune. The monster selection is pretty neat, and as a person who started with World, it was cool to see monsters both familiar and new, and some of these hunts were pretty difficult, especially the Hunter Rank 100 ones. The new additions to gameplay I all really liked, especially like the focus attacks and wound system that helps players that, you know, focus on one part of the monster do massive amounts of damage as like a reward for that. But I think the singular new best addition to the Monster Hunter Wilds game is the Sacred. I know they had like a Palamute or whatever in Rise, but I didn't really play Rise, so I'm just gonna go by this and World. Adding the Sacred was huge. I like that I can sharpen my weapon on the go. I don't have to like stand still and get absolutely obliterated for trying to like sharpen my weapon. I like that you can carry 2 weapons now. That's huge, especially like if I want to bring one hunting horn that's healing and one that does more damage. That's like viable, and it's actually like I like that a lot. I like that it auto runs. I like that, you know, you can quickly get out of there if you need to like run away instead of some ginormous attack that has huge range just like engulfing you and you have like no chance of getting away from it. I really like the Sacred. Feel like it's huge. Like I said, going back and trying to play World without it was an experience to say the least. I don't think World is a bad game. I just like, man, that Sacred really spoils you. I think Monster Hunter Wilds is on par, if not, to me, it's a little bit better than Worlds with its gameplay additions. It's hard for me because I haven't played much of the series to say like, you know, monster for bots. I don't know about all the monsters. I just think that from what I played, this game was more fun, especially for my beloved hunting horn. It's so fun to play in this game. God, I love you, Echo Bubbles. Anyways, yeah, I think it fits nicely in the great games category. That was all to say. I'm gonna put it above Monster Hunter. Actually, I think I might even put it above Battlefield. I've been playing this a lot lately. Okay, Madison's a game I feel like I can't really fairly judge in its entirety, as by the midpoint of the game, friend of the channel Backpack Comics and I were constantly looking to a walkthrough because we just wanted to be done with it. And while he didn't spoil any of the scares for me, we didn't really give it a true and honest try. That being said, the game did offer some pretty scary moments at times, and walking through the constantly changing maze of a house was neat. but I feel like this has just been done by other PT inspired games like Visage a lot better. Also, the voice acting in this game is god awful. It is really jarring and it broke immersion constantly.
A door. A red door.
Like, you know that one Pinocchio movie where like the trailer had him saying, "But
Father, when can I leave to be on my own?"
yeah, this is like that. This is like how bad that was. I feel bad about still tier listing it because we really did use a guide from a certain point in the game. It was mostly out of boredom and frustration with the puzzles. Like, there's this one maze you have to run through, and other than just trial and error, I don't know how you're supposed to do this and just know. Like, you have to run, it's like you have to go like left, right, left, right, left, 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 right, right, and then you're out. And it's like, how in the hell are you supposed to know to do that without just sitting there for like hours? I mean, maybe there was a way to tell if we just suck. I mean, I'll give you that. Me and Backpack might not have a functioning brain cell between the two of us sometimes. Who knows? In my opinion, though, I am feeling it's pretty poop, bro. But I you know what? I'm just gonna put low mid because I'll put in low meh because I don't feel like I can give it poop until I actually play it without the walkthrough. So just know that this is like dipping down into the toilet. It's almost in there. All right, so this is going to be a bit controversial with Outlast Trials. I've only ever really watched other people play the first Outlast game, and I watched a friend of the channel, Ghostly Pumpkin, play Outlast 2 on his stream this past year. So Outlast Trials is my first ever true Outlast experience where I was playing, and it did not leave a very good impression. First, I'll talk about the positives, because there are some. This game's presentation, as far as like sound design and the way it looks, is great. The levels are truly dark and hard to navigate without relying on your trusty night vision, and the way you can kind of hear enemies creeping around in the dark, mumbling to themselves or crying or screaming that they're going to find you, all this leaves Outlast Trials with some truly tense atmosphere. For the first 2 hours that me and my friends played way back in 2024, it was a really good time. I mean, like, fumbling around in the first level and trying to make your way around the cop who has like a thing for cattle prodding people's pucker holes was pretty tense, and it took us a minute to finally dispatch of the snitch. And after that opening level is when my enjoyment of this game pretty much died. With each subsequent trial we did, the game tried to like up the ante to see how far it could push the gore level to the point where it just felt ridiculous. It honestly felt like the person writing these scenarios just gave control over to an edgy 13-year-old who was raised on live leak videos and Reddit 50/50s. By the end of the main series of trials, I was really more just annoyed and ready to put this game down, as it just became like, how far can we push it to like insane levels of core? It's like almost funny how dumb it got to some points, when you could just tell that they were like, this is really gonna make their skin crawl. I mean, the gameplay also just got really similar and pretty boring to me. Now, I'm obviously in the minority here, as many people enjoy this game, but man, even recording the footage you're seeing right now was a chore. Because of its over the top to the point of being stupid gore, I just did not really enjoy this game. It wasn't even that scary, to be honest with you. I think it definitely offers something for certain players, but just not for me. It's in meh tier, it's almost to poop, but it's not quite fecal enough because of how good it looks and sounds. The presentation is definitely carrying this game, and because of that, it is going to go above Madison, because it is better than Madison, in my opinion. Persona 4 was the last of the modern Persona games that I have not played in any way, shape, or form to its completion. I played about 30 hours total and then lost interest before, but came back this year and read a short synopsis of the dungeons leading up to Kanji's, and then picked up where I had left off. Persona 4 is yet another Atlas home run for me, and while I ended up not liking it as much as 5 or 3 Reload, it is still one of the best games I've ever played. It features everything I love about the other titles in the series, while still having the most interesting plot out of all 3 of them, with your characters being at the center of a serial killer's rampage around a quiet Japanese town. I wouldn't say this party of characters is my absolute favorite in the series, but a lot of the characters were at that same high bar of quality featured in the other modern Persona games, with Kanji being my favorite. After finishing this game, I can say it's of the same polish and that slow burn Persona gameplay that's featured in the other games in the series, and I've really come to love this style of games since starting them all those years ago. The murder mystery plotline really did pull me in, and I've always just really enjoyed the slower pace of these games. I find them to be super cozy, and while I can see that other people might find them slow, I just like the juxtaposition of like slow daily life versus basically saving the world at night. Excellent voice acting, a soundtrack full of songs that get stuck in your head, and an art style that still looks very good many years later, all make for another solid entry as far as presentation goes. The combat works like it always does in these more modern Persona games, with it being the one more system that focuses on exploiting weaknesses for extra turns, and some of the encounters here were actually pretty difficult this time around. And while I said that these party members weren't my favorite, I still liked all of them for the most part, except for Teddy. I thought I would like him on design alone, but man, he just opens his mouth and I'm ready to let the killer win and take over the TV world just to make sure I don't gotta hang out with Teddy no more. Yeah, Teddy's annoying. Bitch ass Teddy. I really enjoyed my time with Persona 4 Golden, other than having to spend time with Teddy, and I do think it's one of the best games of the year that I played, and probably one of the best games that I've ever played. Uh-oh, another controversial one. Silent Hill F features a female protagonist. Alright, wait, just give that a second. Okay, hopefully that was enough to scare off all the anti-woke guys. It doesn't take very much. Anyways, Silent Hill F was one of my most anticipated games this year, as over the last few years, I have been slowly getting more and more into the series. Although done by a totally different team, the recent Silent Hill 2 remake was a stellar return to form for the franchise, and so I was hopeful that this game would follow in that game's high-quality footsteps. And as someone who has played a fair share of Silent Hill games at this point, I walked away from this game really enjoying it. I feel like it does capture a lot of what I love about the series, like untrustworthy side characters, who even the best of which have their own twisted emotions or motivations. Or even like a main character who we sit in complicated emotions with for the course of a game as it slowly drip feeds us reasons for the unsettling fog rolling in and the events of the game unfolding. Or one of my favorite parts of Silent Hill, the creature designs being based off of the trauma of a character. This game centers around a girl in Japan during the 1960s and her struggles with conforming to what society tells her she should accept and what her future will be. As such, many of the monsters resemble the fears that she has around the pressures of being a woman, and as we slowly unravel the plot, it becomes clear just how twisted the knot tying her and all of her friends together truly is. The visuals are absolutely stunning, and I really like seeing the world of 1960s Japan and this small town come to life, even if it was through the lens of terrifying monsters chasing me through this otherwise idyllic town. The soundtrack was also really well orchestrated and composed around Japanese-style music with tinges of horror to match the tone of the game in a brilliant way. The Japanese voice acting here was extremely powerful, and each actor and actress provided their talent to really making this an emotionally charged experience. And the story was so surreal in that Silent Hill way where things eventually come to a head as all the pieces align. I will say that there are gameplay portions of this game that I think will be divisive to some players, like the pairing system, which I can see feeling a bit out of place in a game like this. However, for me, while the combat is a bit repetitive, I also remember the combat of the older Silent Hill games being far more clunky and frustrating than the two most recent releases. Now, by the end, I was very done with the combat in this game, like I was ready to put it down, and while I enjoyed my time, I do think it does get a little bit much, because there's so much of it. But, you know, I still found myself overall enjoying this game, what it had to offer. If anything is going to be divisive about this game, it will be the combat. Aside from, you know, stupid political grifts, it'll be the combat. Now, because of that, I do feel like Silent Hill F will probably go at the top of the great games. Actually, you know what? No, I think I do enjoy Monster Hunter Wilds a little bit more than Silent Hill F. Trails is a series that I have bought most of the games for by now, but I've never really gotten around to playing them, so the remake of this game started it all for me. And it did not disappoint. For many years, all the JRPG content creators I like to watch talk about video games, talk about how good this series is, and now I've just gotten to take a little dip into this universe of these games, and the hype was all correct so far. I think the thing I loved most about this game was the pacing. It really allows its journey to just breathe. The game has its high stakes moments towards the end, but the whole journey to the climax of this game is a slow burn, cozy journey between two best friends, surrogate siblings, who light up the lives of everyone they meet. The side characters are excellent as well, with each party member bringing their own unique fighting style, vibe, and role to aid Estelle and Joshua. Going through this slower paced journey made it feel like the game really allowed the player to just experience the world before the story, with large story moments usually coming after a decent amount of exploration and side content, where players would be drip-fed things about the world and the characters. Watching these two get closer and taking on the conspiracy plot that's at the center of all of this while trying to honor their father's name and become mercenaries in their own right was such a fun ride. Also, the combat system works really well in this game, and between attacking weaker enemies for quick battles in the open world and the far more interesting turn-based combat where strategy matters, I found Trails in the Sky to be an excellent turn-based RPG. Now, I obviously can't talk much about the story without spoiling things, but I will say that last act was packed full of reveals and just excellent story payoff. I don't know if I can wait for the Part 2 remake yet, as I have started and played about 5 hours of the older PSP version on Steam. Just the story is that good. The music and voice acting are excellent, the special moves and magic effects are beautiful, and the combat is engaging and fun. The characters in the world feel like they've been well thought out and written deeper than surface level. Sure, some of them can be a little bit tropey, but even those ones are lovable. Looking at you, Agate. Yeah, this game is definitely one of the best games I played all year. So Sonic Racing Crossworlds is next, and it is such a good kart racer, and I'm really glad that I picked this game up as a palate cleanse from all of the big story-heavy games that I had played this year. Me and my household had a lot of fun with this one. And yes, I did roll the credits on it once, so technically I did beat the game. I guess. I don't know. Make your own list, like I said. But all jokes aside, it's an excellent kart racer. It's a ton of fun. It's fast-paced, Sonic and Friends action. And it has Joker from Persona 5. Oh, I want to be different. Oh, I made a video essay about how everyone who likes Persona 5 came into the series as a tourist, and I posted it on Reddit for karma. Shut the fuck up, dork. This game's great. Only because Joker's in it. Just like with the Phantom Thieves, he's carrying this game's roster on his back. Okay, all for real, all jokes aside, this game is really good. It has a lot to unlock, it has tons of characters across all different franchises to play as. It's got a bumpin', if not a little scarce soundtrack at launch that had gotten better every time they've added a new racer to it. And most importantly, it's just pure fun. Sonic Racer Crossworld is a great party racing game that sits alongside Mario Kart as just an excellent option. And I'm sure me and my group will sink a lot more hours into it in the years to come. Great game. And it has Joker from Persona 5. Okay, no, I'm not human. So this is one of those games that seemed interesting to me that I picked up after seeing how positive the reviews were and how many good things I'd heard about it. And No, I'm Not a Human is a pretty solid walking simulator with horror themes and a cool gameplay concept of like needing people around you, but also having to be cautious with who you trust. The art style is unsettling and a lot of the characters look odd to say the least, which really challenges that human part of us that wants to make like a knee-jerk reaction based on how people present themselves. That being said, I just didn't really get into it as much as a lot of other people did. And while I found the game interesting, I just didn't feel like the need to chase all the endings after I got my second or third one, because I was just kind of a little bored of it, to be honest with you. I appreciate that the playthroughs are short enough to respect my time and that it's not, some of the people that are the visitors aren't always the visitors, but I just didn't enjoy it enough to run back to see everything. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the good tier, as I don't think it's something I'll go back to anytime soon, despite it being a relatively enjoyable experience, all things considered. It just felt like the whole gameplay loop got a little stale for me, pretty quickly actually. Finally got around to the big one, fellas. Finally got around at my big age to one of the most legendary video games of all time, and what a beauty it was. Ocarina of Time is such a fun playthrough once I pushed through the Kid Link portion of the beginning of the game that I had played a million times at this point. And I used the 3DS version because it brought with it some pretty nice visual upgrades. Also, it's just been sitting collecting dust on my shelf, so I decided to blow that off and go ahead and get started on finally beating Ocarina of Time this year. And navigating this game on the 3DS was surprisingly fluid. The 3DS is a console that I want to utilize more in the next year, but that's going to be for another video. Anyways, this is still the Ocarina of Time everyone knows and loves in a prettier but maybe less nostalgic coat of paint for some, and I truly loved finally getting to check this game off my backlog. From the different biomes that you visit and how much the gameplay within those biomes changes to the narrative themes of classic good versus evil, this game is a legend for a reason. Everything still holds up really well to the test of time, and this version proves that with the right additions and still preserving the original game with enough care, sometimes a remake or remaster is a welcome addition to a game's legacy. The combat is fun. I like the Z targeting system. I don't really have a problem with it. I think that this game kind of polishes a lot of the issues I had with maybe the Nintendo 64 version. Obviously it looks better, which is like a big deal for some people. But yeah, I really enjoyed this game. It's really beautiful. I think it's just like, it's such a moment in time. And I think it's like a big experience for everybody when they finally beat this game. And I'm glad to be a part of that club now. Music is obviously legendary. The story is legendary. Everything about this game is like iconic at this point. It's, you know where it's going. Come on. This one was a big deal for me to jump into right after because I'd already played Majora's Mask in 2024, and after beating Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess was the one I wanted to play the most. This was because somebody that I've already mentioned multiple times, Simone Prince, has rated this as his favorite video game of all time. He recommended this heavily to me once I finished Ocarina of Time, and so I decided just to ride the Zelda wave into finishing another game in the series. I did really like the darker vibe of this game, as it reminded me a lot of Majora's Mask, which was my first ever completed Zelda game. So yeah, it took me most of my life to get around to finally finishing all of these games, which I do now regret. The series is legendary for a reason, and Twilight Princess does do a good job in carrying the torch for the other games that came before it. Now, main things for me that I really enjoyed were the art style being of a more mature nature and taking on darker colors than had ever really been explored in Zelda games before this. Now, it did have that eerie sound design once again that really reminded me of Majora's Mask, with the more spooky tones and like darker themes and songs. All in all, this is a great Zelda game, but what holds it back as being good as the other two that I have played were the wolf portions of this game, of which there are a lot. My god, was I tired of unleashing Link's Dark Passenger by the end of this game. The wolf portions just felt like whatever, and were kind of just tedious, and then there was so many of them. It just became a slog to push through so much sniffing and hopping and mauling and sniffing and sniffing and sniffing. I guess you could say that any game gets repetitive after a while, but I really hated the doggo bits of this game by the end. Aside from that, the story is pretty well written and the boss fights are really cool. I didn't even mind the water temple dungeon thing in this game all that much. It was the one that took me the longest to complete, but I know like water temples in these games are usually like notoriously difficult. And that one was a little annoying, but I didn't even mind that as much as the wolf parts. I still think that Twilight Princess is a good game overall. I just don't know if it's one I would play again anytime in the near or distant future. I was happy to see the credits roll, and I stopped my short Zelda series run right after this game because I was kind of just exhausted with Zelda after these two games back to back, but specifically the wolf parts. I am going to pick up the series again in 2026. That being said, I think that Twilight Princess is a great game. All right, we're down to the last 3 games I finished for this year, the first of which is Dispatch. This one was one that was heavily recommended by some of my friends who played it at launch, and it was a solid experience. The gameplay probably could have been a bit more interesting, but overall the story and choices felt pretty impactful, and it was a superhero story with some darker undertones, which I'm all here for. The voice acting is full of talent, the writing is witty and funny while still managing to keep that emotional intensity when necessary. All in all, this was a really cinematic experience with some okay, but a little boring gameplay mechanics. Luckily, it didn't overstay its welcome, and the narrative really just hooked me from the start. Not too much else to say here. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the great games tier, but, you know, without spoiling, this is a game that the story really matters. I'm not going to spoil that for anybody. Just know that it gets pretty intense. Alright, next up is Mouthwashing, a horror game that captured the hearts of many in 2024. I was pretty intrigued about this game after seeing how many people just really recommended and talked about it, and just decided to throw it on my Steam Deck and knock it out in a day when I was off work. And I'm really glad I did this, though admittedly I would like to play through this at least one more time before sharing any of my thoughts deeper than surface level, because sometimes I see these video essays and I'm like, damn, how do y'all come up with all this? So yeah, my little 8-brain take is that it's a good game because of the world building and the story, which gets pretty dark and intense at times as the stranded crew descends into madness. Now, the next game on this list is a game that I actually did criticize for being a mostly linear and cinematic experience, but there are some key differences between this game and that game. Mouthwashing doesn't feel like it pads the experience by putting unnecessary gameplay for the sake of stretching its runtime. It felt like the narrative was punchy and it offered a lot of like really dark themes, and it just left me thinking about it long after the credits rolled. It overall respected my time, which I think any game that relies on its story to carry a simple gameplay loop should aim to do. Easily a great game, though this may end up being a game that I look back on in even higher regard once I play it again. Or find a video by somebody smarter than me that can tell me what I was supposed to understand. And finally, the last game of 2025 that I finished is the newest release in the long-running Mafia series, Mafia Old Country. I got this game on a buy two get one free from GameStop sale, and I thought, why not? It's on sale. I've only really played the third entry of the series, and I thought it was just okay and never finished it. So this was actually the first and only title of the series that I finished. And it was a pretty mixed bag in my opinion. First up, the good. From a cinematic standpoint, this game is pretty good. It looks great, it sounds great, it's written well. As a movie, this game is a great experience. It may be pretty predictable, but overall it has everything that like a great mafia movie should have in it. Forbidden love, tense storytelling, a likable main character and side characters, easy to hate villains. Everything as far as the presentation and story would put this easily in the great games category, but it's the gameplay part of this that I found to be lacking, unfortunately. To keep things short, the gameplay loop is very basic. You spend most of your chapter in this linear game walking around, talking to people, getting info, then shooting at guys in these big, obvious areas with lots of cover. And then every chapter ends with a knife fight. I'm not kidding. Every single chapter, I think, ends with a knife fight with a big bad dude of that chapter. Rinse and repeat until the game is over. It gets really dull really quick. And this made a game that was under 20 hours feel much longer. And the only thing pushing me through that slog sometimes was the story. And even that was a push sometimes. The gameplay itself isn't bad, it just gets really boring and it's almost like it didn't need to be there. This game could be experienced through just watching the cutscenes on YouTube, and I actually think sometimes that would be a more enjoyable experience, which is a problem when this is a video game and not a movie. And because of that, I don't think it's a poop game, but I do think it has to go in the meh tier. I definitely think it's up here above Final Fantasy X too. This is every game that I have played in 2025. But yeah, if you like that video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I am back for 2026. I don't know to what level of content I will be producing or like how often, but I do appreciate anybody who watches this video who's still riding with me in 2026. Sorry for the year off, just needed some time away. Let me know what games you beat in the comments below. Let me know what you would like to see next. And yeah, take care of yourselves. Love you guys. Peace.